I actually love studying behavior and relationships in business and how you can actually remove a lot of the obstacles and how you can get people to literally start thinking along the right path and communicating openly and not being afraid of failure. I think that's a critical message. Too many people are afraid of failure. It's people are afraid to take a risk, and they don't necessarily appreciate that the real risk many times, or very often, the real risk is not being prepared to take risk.
Pat Byrne, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure to be here, Connor.
Could we start with CityJet, right? I know it became something a little bit different than what it started at, but could you just talk a little bit about what ultimately it became, what you kind of grew it into, and maybe a number just to kind of give an idea of the scale of what it is today?
Well, I think what it started out to be and what it is now are two completely different things. But so is the aviation business, and the aviation business is like that. It's pretty dynamic, and you don't always get what you want from it. But when we started, our idea was it was very niche. London City Airport had just come into being, and I had the idea that somebody should be operating a service between Dublin and London City and challenging the sort of monopoly situation that other airlines had with Heathrow, Dublin Heathrow. That somebody became me, and I decided to set up the airline back in 92, got our license in 93 and started scheduled services in 94. But I had harnessed Richard Branson at that stage to have his name on the tail because I thought I'd have a better chance of Virgin on the tail and CityJet on the front of the fuselage was a better option. So started as Virgin CityJet in a franchise arrangement with Branson, but he didn't own any of the company, but basically we're paying him royalties to use his brand to get us going. We were offering a very classy service at the time. So not only the convenience of the new airport in London City, but our onboard service was good. Our whole customer care philosophy was pretty strong, I would say, compared to some of the offerings that are out there at the moment. But it was a challenging, it was a challenging thing to take on, and over the years, it became more and more difficult to do it on our own. We broke away from Virgin in '96. We went, completely solo with CityJet, but difficult when you're up against Aer Lingus, Ryanair, British Midland at the time, and whatever. They have bigger budgets, greater distribution. So we needed to change the model, and we started to look towards initially more franchise and then ultimately wet leasing, where we would fly for others. So it kind of called for a lot of ego suppression and paint the airplanes in other people's colors and wear their uniforms, speak their language. So it morphed into a wet lease business over a long period of years.
And it's interesting, right? As you were talking about it, okay, I'm reminded, I read this book years ago, can't remember his name now, but he's an American hedge fund manager. He owns Greenlight Capital, just can't remember his name. But he had written a thesis when he was in college about how the airline industry is just a complete nightmare for an investor, right? You've got oil prices, there's just so many moving parts. You've got unionized staff and things like that. So I'm always interested in people who obviously start airlines, because it's kind of an exciting idea, right? An exciting space. But then it seems to me that it's very, very difficult to get it right because there's so few things that are within your control ultimately.
Yeah, well, I mean, I became an accidental airline founder, I suppose. I was in financial services for 20 years before that. I'd sold my business, which is now Cornmarket Financial Services for public sector unions. But and I was a younger man than now, with some means and a lot of ambition. I had an aircraft. I was a pilot. I was always interested in the business of aviation, and its propensity to lose money. So nothing would do me but to go and find out how much and how fast you could lose money. But you're right. I mean, there are so many moving parts to it, and there are. It's quite. It's very very dynamic. It's very punishing because everything is a high cost, and if you miss the mark on just one thing, it doesn't just wreck your day, but it actually can challenge your business, and all in pursuit of a tiny, tiny margin. Ryanair defy gravity, and they produce double-digit margins consistently and have done for many, many years. But there's a whole special study on Ryanair. It's a completely special animal in its own right and highly successful. But generally in the airline business, to get to a double-digit margin is phenomenal. But the vast majority of airlines aspire to something between 3 to 6% and taking all of the risk. So everybody on the periphery of airlines tend to make money, and the airlines really struggle to actually eke out a margin. So it's either insanity or it's vocational. I'm not sure which it is, but that's basically the preserve of the airline.
Did you ever kind of regret getting into it? And I only ask, right? Because let's say when you're in it and there's all these things happening, right? It's like I think of it, I just think I could never. I personally would. I'd run it into the ground, almost within a month, I'd say. Like, was there ever kind of a moment where you were just kind of like, why am I doing this at all? It's just.
No, there was never a moment when I really regretted it. There were probably 100,000 moments when I regretted it. Yeah, often. Very, very tough. So many times you would look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and, you'd kind of consider where to put the razor, because it was such a challenge every single day to get up and go again. And, the myriad of problems that you're still dealing with from yesterday, last week, the anticipation of the horrific surprises you're going to get today and this week. So yeah, very, 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 very tough.
What kept you in it?
I suppose, well, the intellectual stimulation of it is immense. Now you can't take that to the bank, but it is immense. And I suppose you get challenged by the challenge and the many challenges, and then you don't want to quit. And you have a belief that you actually can actually make this work. So it is a supreme challenge, and it's fairly intoxicating business. The people who work in aviation are very committed, extremely dedicated professionals. They're not in it. A lot of them are not in it for the money. They're into it because they want to do a good job. It's also, I think they're sort of blessed with a sense of service to people to provide. Obviously safety is of paramount importance. So they're people who are immensely uh, considerate of what they do, the importance of what they do, the absolute necessity to get it right. You have got to be 100%. You can't be 99% safe. You have to be 100% safe, because it's a very binary outcome if you're not 100% safe. You must be that. That brings with it a commitment to, I suppose, accuracy, um, not quitting, doing the best job possible. It blends into them giving service to people, not just protecting them and getting them there safely, but also doing it in the best possible way. And I think that there's an awful lot of planning involved. There's an awful lot of detail. So it attracts people who have got great skill sets, whether it's engineering, whether it's flying, whether it's administration, whether it's customer care. You get this bunch of people coming together. And certainly as the business leader, I found that my motivation was theirs. So they motivated the motivator, and it would go around in a circle. So you couldn't quit, because you'd be letting a lot of people down, because they're believing in the story, they're believing in where you're trying to go. So it becomes a collective thing, and you really are on a mission, and the mission becomes the important thing. So you just don't let it go.
Did it take over your Did it take over the rest of your life as well? Like, I'd imagine, like, these problems, like, I have problems obviously in my business all the time, right? And they do seep into my personal life. I find I'm thinking about them when I should be asleep and things like that. Like, did you find that was happening?
I found it's very intrusive. It really occupies an awful lot of space in your head and in your emotions. And you have to fight very hard to make enough time for the really important things. But I've been blessed with a fantastic wife, Jane, who has lived through all of the bad times and all of the good times. But the bad times are always outweighing the good times in aviation. Generally, it's a bit like professional sport, I think, as well. It's the same sort of thing. But it is like that. But without that, without a partnership like that, a personal partnership like that, I would not have been able to do it. Just would not. Without her support, I would not have been able to do it. So you have to actually really cop yourself on. You have to fight hard to make time for the things that matter. And otherwise, your personal life will suffer.
Take me back to Cornmarket. I think it was called something else back then when you got involved. Can you tell me about how you kind of got involved in that business? Maybe how you ended up buying into it and the ultimate growth and sale of it.
Yeah, it was called Savings and Investments. And then it became Woodchester Brokers, and then it became renamed Cornmarket. But back in the day, I was again a much younger man, and I was in the bank in Chase and Bank of Ireland, and I was a disgruntled bank clerk, not really impressed for where I was going. And one day, a regular customer of mine over the counter just basically said to me, "You're having a bad day." And I said, "I am." I said, "I suppose you're going to offer me a job." And he said, "I was thinking of it." And he said, "Why don't you come around to the office in Dawson Street next Tuesday, and we'll talk about it." So I did, and I joined what was then Savings and Investments, which was a small company on Dawson Street, opposite the Mansion House, 35 Dawson Street, and probably had about 14, 15 people. And that was 1974. And uh, major recession about to hit the UK, which affected us over here as well. So I started off, learned how to sell insurance and investment policies, and going great because people were responding to our ads on the front pages of the Independent and the Irish Times. Recession hit, the ads dried up. We hadn't any more money to market, and things were going south. And all of the sales team were being let go, and I wasn't let go because my figures were still managing to hang in there. And I came across a client of the company one day. I was trying to sell him something else, and he was a teacher, and I realized that he really couldn't afford anything else, and so recommended that he didn't do anything for now. And he happened to spot a leaflet in my bag with a medicine bottle with a blue rose, and it was for a thing called permanent health insurance. And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "That's not for you. You're a teacher. You're well covered. I mean, tell me what that's about." So I told him what it was about. I said, "Well, if you lose your permanent income, this will replace 75% of your income and forever for the rest of your days." And he said, I'm the chairman of the local branch of the INTO, the Irish National Teachers Organisation, and for the last 20 years, we're collecting money for one of our members who had a football accident." And I said, "But he's covered." "No, he's not covered." And there was a gap in the public service conditions governing long-term sick. And so I went back to the office, very excited, told my boss, and we designed a scheme. And we went and got underwriters in the UK, and we launched a scheme for teachers. And then that was national teachers, then we did secondary teachers, then we did nurses. And the business grew. And within a short number of years, we had 7 branches, we had 120 people staff. We had 55,000 clients. We were deducting money from a payroll source. So these were people who would not lose their jobs. So we were recession proofed. It was a phenomenal business. And we sold 75% of it to Craig McKinney's Woodchester in the late 80s. And I stayed on as MD for 3 years. Wasn't to join the PLC world and cashed in the rest of my chips. And I left. But it went on to become Cornmarket. And today it's a phenomenal business.
Yeah, it's huge core market. And so am I right in saying that you were kind of the originator of the public sector business of that, which is basically the core niche business of Cornmarket
Yeah,
today?
I was very young in that business, but I was managing director by the age of 26. But I originated the ideas and designed the products, and yeah, that was my concept.
And was the agreement for you to own a part of this business at that stage when you became
Yeah,
MD?
I owned 40% of it.
And was the your boss at the time? I don't know if you mentioned his name there, but was that an easy agreement to make? Was he kind of happy to bring you on as a partner and
Yeah,
everything at that stage?
great guy, Mervyn Percival, God rest him. He's had a few years now, but he was older than me, obviously, good bit older. But he was a progressive thinker. He saw the value, and he saw the energy, I suppose, that I was bringing to the business to transform it. So I didn't have to argue my point terribly hard. I thought he was great, actually. It's fantastic. We had a very good partnership.
And when you were sitting in the bank, right, and he came into you, and obviously it sounds like you really didn't enjoy the job at the bank. Um, when you got into insurance and kind of were selling it and doing all of that, did that really feel like you'd kind of found something that you were good at and that you enjoyed?
Oh yeah, it was. I came alive when I started to do that. I just felt that this was absolutely for me. I could express myself, and that went on to me developing a lot of concepts about marketing and the whole idea of affinity marketing. Really, I suppose we were probably one of the very early movers with affinity marketing. Marketing to a group of like-minded people doing the same job and so on, and how you could actually leverage that and develop product for that and develop the right messaging for that to make it work. And then that led into the technology. How could we actually introduce technology? So we set up our own software business, got in some experts to run that, and we pioneered the whole collecting of money at source, through one box, and then being able to split it and send it to various insurance companies or banks or whatever. So, that whole payment split technology back in the 70s had not been invented. And so we went with the emerging technology. We were an IBM house for a long time, but we went through all of the mini mainframes that IBM were producing at the time. So it was an exciting time.
Did you when you were sitting in the bank or even just slightly after, did you feel like you wanted to kind of own a business and do something for yourself at that stage, or did it just kind of happen organically through your job with savings and investments?
I think it happened organically. I mean, when I was in the bank, I was very keen to do marketing, and I was studying marketing at night. And the bank wanted me to do accountancy. No disrespect to accountants, Connor. Uh, you know,
None
the,
taken.
the world needs plenty of them, and to keep us on the straight and narrow. But no, all my colleagues in the bank at the time, my peers, all did accountancy. I didn't want to do accountancy. The personnel manager in the bank said to me, "There's no future for marketing in financial services." I think he got that one wrong. So that really pissed me off, and I said, "Look, this is not the place for me." When I got into savings and investments, I started really developing the whole idea of not being a transactional person, but being a relational person. And I think I discovered very early on that the key to selling is actually relational, not transactional. And the next best new customer that you actually can have is the one you already have. And the warmest lead you can ever get is one given to you by your existing customer whom you have built a very good rapport and trust with. So I really started to focus on relational versus transactional. And I've never lost that. Everything I've done since in any of the businesses I've been involved in over the last, God knows how many number of years, and even especially with CityJet going into that at the beginning, it was all about building relationship with your customers and setting out clearly what they could expect from you. And you make them a promise and you keep the promise. And if you can't keep the promise, you apologize for that and you make a new promise and you make things right. But that probably that trait, I think, in my personality probably speaks volumes for why I didn't let the thing go. and why I was committed to saving it each time. And it was challenged many, many, many times over the years because I really believed it was worth it was a business worth protecting.
What about when you sold what became Cornmarket, right? When you sold that business, what age were you at that stage?
I think I was 34 when we sold the 75% of the equity to Woodchester, and I stayed on for another 3 years. So I was 37 when I left, and I took the balance of my
And it's
shares.
probably like obviously I don't know what you would have made from it, right? But it sounds like it was a kind of an early enough time to have a have a windfall essentially.
Yeah, none of my peers were doing it at that age. That's for sure. It was a very good deal. I did get a lot of money out of it, and I probably should have done other things instead of setting up an airline. That was
Really? Really? Do you and I know I asked you a little bit about, regret earlier, right? But that's kind of in the moment. Like, looking back now, do you feel like maybe there's a bit of a sliding doors moment there where you could have done something else?
I could have done something else, and one thing I was interested in was private medicine. I was interested in developing a private children's hospital and developing it as a sort of a medical club to get around some of the legislative issues that was protecting, the VHI at the time, which had a monopoly. And I was kind of interested in maybe a kind of a child's version of BlackRock Clinic. And that was something I was working on. I was originating that idea. And the airline idea got in the way, and there was a greater urgency around it, and I found it probably more compelling. I don't regret doing the airline thing. I mean, I think that um, what I've learned over the years from that has been absolutely phenomenal. And I've been able to take an awful lot of those learnings into other businesses because I left CityJet when we sold it to Air France in 2000, and I left as CEO. So I was out of CityJet for 14 years. Uh, they say you shouldn't go back. I did go back. Well, I went back in from the outside in 2015 to CityJet because Air France had sold CityJet to a company in Nuremberg in Germany. They hadn't got a strategy. I was concerned about what I was seeing happening from outside. I went to the main lessor in CityJet and said, "Look, you see what I see?" And he said, "Yeah. How do you plan?" I said, "Funnily enough, I do." Showed him the strategy, and he said, "That's great." He said, "It's just one more thing. We'll do it." He said, "But one more thing." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "You got to go back in as CEO." I said, "No, I've got my own software business. I'm the CEO of that. I'm not." Well, he said, "Then we won't do it." So that's fine. It's a great idea, but we're not going to do it. So I spoke to my partners in my software business, and they said, "You will not. We won't be able to live with you if you don't do it. You'll regret not doing it. So go and do it, and we'll take care of the software business." And that's what I did. I went back in 2015 as the full-time CEO, and that was chapter 2 for me with CityJet. So
In preparation for this, I heard your interview with Matt Cooper on Matt Cooper's podcast, which was very good. And you mentioned that you got distracted basically from this children's hospital idea by the CityJet idea essentially. And but you also said something that was very interesting. You said that you had gone into a meeting with Aer Lingus and you had felt that there was a kind of an arrogance about the monopoly that they held at the time, and it kind of it pissed you off essentially, which is exactly what you said a few moments ago when you were left the bank, when someone in the bank said to you something. Is anger, or I suppose having your own opinion that seems to be different to other people, does that drive you into these things in any way?
yes, it does. I have an abhorrence for groupthink. I would champion critical thinking all the time. If everybody agrees with something, it's probably not a good idea. So I think that it's not that I want to be a contrarian for the sake of it, but I've often, not always, but I have often challenged the way things are done. And so if I think that there is a better way to do something, I would promote that and promote myself as the provocateur of that change. So I would say that yeah, I would see myself as a bit of a lightning rod for change and for transformation. Um, I would challenge convention a lot. I would ask why. That would probably be the word I use most in my vocabulary. Why?
Tell me about the deal with Richard Branson and how that developed over time.
It was interesting. It was like kind of hanging around with a rock star. I basically, you know, I had raised, I'd put in my own seed capital to get CityJet going. I hired the early team. We wrote the manuals, we got our license, all that kind of stuff. Was very diligent work, boring but necessary. And I had institutional backing and I had private equity backing. But I was still unconvinced that we were going to get it off the ground with a new name like CityJet, needed something bigger. So I just said to one of my colleagues, do you know anybody who could get me Richard Branson's number? Because his brand just came to mind, the most recognized brand at the time in the UK. And literally after about 4 phone calls, I had this number. So I dialed the number and lovely girl at the other end answered the phone and said, yes, this is Richard Branson's private number in Holland Park Road. How did you get it? And, and sort of, I said, well, I got it from a trusted colleague. I said, but I really would love to come and see Richard. I'd like to talk to him about an idea. And she says, darling, have you any idea how many people have this thought that they have a great idea and they want to come and see Richard? And I said, but no, really is a good idea. I think he's going to like it. And she said, I'm falling in love with your Irish brogue, she said. And if you hadn't an Irish accent, I wouldn't be doing this, she said. But she said, he's heading to Gatwick in a car in 10 minutes' time. He's going to Miami. And she said, if you can send me a fax. Now, a lot of people listening to this podcast mightn't even know that at that time, in 1993, faxes were the thing. There were no emails, no internet. It was, no mobile phones. So fax was a step up on a telex machine. So she said, you need to get something to me in 10 minutes. And she said, I can't guarantee you read it, but I will guarantee it goes in the car with him. So I sat there, I put the phone down and I said, how am I going to get my 160-page business plan into a 10-minute fax? And that was probably the biggest challenge of my career. And I did, and I sent it, and nothing happened. 3 weeks later, I got a knock on my door in Dublin, and this guy said, are you Pat Byrne? I said, I am. I said, Mr. Branson sent me to come and see, do you exist? He said, or is this all a joke? And it went from there, and I saw Branson myself, hit it off with him straight off, and we got on, and he liked me. And he liked what I was trying to do, and he thought it was cheeky, and he felt it was a good idea. He'd like to give a bloody nose to the other carriers, and it was kind of like the rebel in him actually reacted well. His management team didn't. They were kind of jealous of that. They didn't like anybody getting close to Richard, because they were all the princes in his castle and whatever. So, but my relationship with him was good, was very good. But he's mercurial, He's challenging. He's fun. He's frustrating. He's like many great people. He has the same flaws we all have, And
Is he like what he kind of is portrayed as in the media? Like, I look at him as kind of an adventurer. He doesn't seem to do any work to me. That's what I have this sort of feeling that he built this brand by kind of being very influential and all of that. Is that really the reality of it?
it is, yeah. I mean, he if you ever watch him in interviews, he wants to be asked questions. He won't go and prepare something. He won't deliver a speech. He'll say, ask me some questions, which is kind of an easier way out. But he's got the attention span of a gnat. He's like, after 9 seconds, he's on to the next shiny new idea. He's brilliantly creative in his thinking, I think. He surrounded himself by 1 or 2 particularly good people. And he's very smart, but he doesn't get his hands dirty, but he is very smart.
Well, look, I'm someone who has a short attention span, right? It's probably not as short as Richard Branson's. Well, I don't know, right? But I think that holds me back. I do think. But then I look at someone I like Richard Branson. I hear you saying he's got a very short attention span. Do you have any sense of how he operates, given given what what I see as a personal limitation.
I think that he's been so successful in creating a very positive image. The brand is fantastic. At times I worried, not worried, but I mean, long after we left the Virgin scenario, but I often surmised that, he was making the brand too elastic. He was going into too many different things, but it has endured. I mean, very, very positive press. Became the people's champion. He was probably one of the earliest populist icons around, and his public appeal was enormous, and that got him in everywhere. It opened doors with governments, with whatever. He was so that became very powerful, and it became a momentum that was unstoppable. And I think that was his trick. Not trick, but it was his, and to his great credit, I mean, he was able to do it. So that was his currency. His brand was his currency. And his brand was, well, if you're letting me down, you're letting the people down, because I'm the champion of the people. I'm trying to do things for people. And he got away with it.
He like I'm trying to think about you at that stage, right? Because ultimately, I think most people might benefit from sharing their idea with someone like Richard Branson, but I also think most people wouldn't do it, right? Even if they thought that they had something that he might like, I think most people wouldn't actually try reach out to him. Um, and even at that stage, and actually even more at that stage, because he was there were less famous, there were fewer famous entrepreneurs back then, right? And Richard Branson was this kind of figure. Um, did you ever think about, oh, I don't know if I should reach out to Richard Branson, who, as you said, was kind of a famous, almost rock star at that point?
No, to me, it was very simple. Like, for me, it was such a compellingly good idea. Not because I thought of it, but because I wasn't desperate, but I was absolutely certain that, I had the backing of serious investors. We had the staff all hired. We had the aircraft leased. And I had a pang of conscience that said, this is not going to work. It was last minute. It was stage fright. This is not going to work with our own brand on our own at this point in time. I need help. And I said, where can I get the help? I've got to make a big bang out of this. And there's no point in doing it by halves. So I went to the biggest brand I could think of. And I was just determined I was going to build a relationship with this guy. And I was going to stay at it until he said yes.
So at that point, was it actually part of Virgin? Like, you were branded as Virgin,
We
were
were
you?
branded as Virgin CityJet. We took on the VS flight codes for our flights. So they sold our tickets for us, collected the money, their reservation centers and so on. And so yeah, and we had to agree to deliver the quality of service on board that Virgin were famous for at that stage, which was a bit of a mistake because it was overspec'd for a 1 hour flight to London. It was crazy. We were delivering the Virgin upper class service on board, which was unwarranted. We did pull that back a little bit. We still did things very well, but that was overspec'd and too expensive to deliver.
And the service essentially was flying to from Dublin to London City,
Yes.
which was kind of obviously a shorter route. You're right in the middle of London City when you arrive, but it was kind of in competition essentially with Aer Lingus, who were going to Heathrow at
Yeah,
the
we were
time.
competing with Heathrow, really. Yeah, Ryanair were not a direct competition for us. It was a different product, different segment of the market, and they were going to Stansted. So it was Aer Lingus we were taking on, yeah.
So what happened then? So the relationship with Richard Branson at Virgin didn't work out. Ultimately, what happened with that?
Well, ultimately, things were difficult with Virgin in the sense that, because they were collecting our money and it was coming through very slowly. And as an accountant, you can appreciate that. Cash flow is everything. And even if you lose 2 days in a month and you have bills to pay, you can't suffer that. So there were lots of issues like that. So we had to get control of our own cash. So I basically rang him up one day, and we were having difficulty, and he knew I was unhappy and whatever. So I rang him one day. I remember it was a Friday morning, and he was in his bath. He told me, and he said, "God," he said, "if I knew it was you, I wouldn't have answered." And he was in the bath. I said, "Well, look, Richard, let's call the dogs off. Let's call the lawyers off. This is ridiculous. We started this together. We should end it together. I'm going to come to see you. Let's stop all this legal nonsense." And he said, "Okay." And I went to see him, and I went to see him in his Oxfordshire house. And he said, "Do you really want to leave me?" I said, "Yeah, we are breaking up." "Yes, I do." I said, "It's good for both of us. This is not working, and you know it's not working, and your team are not happy with it, and my team are not happy with it. So it's time to go." And so he agreed.
Why did he want to keep it? Was it good for version?
Yeah, I think it was. I think that he like a lot of people in business, he doesn't like failure, or he doesn't like to. He wouldn't like it on his copybook that something didn't work out, that the relationship had fractured. I think it was probably psychological more than anything else. It certainly didn't make any business sense for him to keep it. That's for sure.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think even behind the kind of Branson, the personal brand or whatever, I would also think that there'd sort of be an almost cutthroat, cold-hearted capitalist there. That would just be cutting things that didn't make sense. But I don't know. There's a real almost human element to that story.
There is, and he is very human. I mean, he was great fun to be with. I mean, there's no question about that. He is Mr. Party, and he is really, really seriously good fun, and great energy, like enormous energy, and he's funny. He's actually very funny. He has a fantastic sense of humor. But at the same time, though, it's kind of, yeah, it's difficult to maintain a relationship with somebody like that, because they are onto the next thing, and they're everybody's property. So not, you know, I knew it had run its course. It was nearly 3 years, 2.5, 2 and 3/4 years. I knew it had run its course. Had things been a little bit better, we would have been very happy to stay there for a long time. But it wasn't working well. I had to do what was right for the business. So I had to protect it. So I knew we had to go independent. So we picked 4th of July, Independence Day, to go independent, and we launched completely as CityJet, and with our own flight codes, which I've been working on in parallel. So it was ready to go. One we'd prepared earlier, as the celebrity chefs say on their cooking programs. But and we pulled, and we relaunched, and it was until the next crisis.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was going to ask you next. What happened then? Essentially, you were on your own at that point.
We
You'd
were on
obviously.
our own. We were talking to Aer Lingus, or they were talking to us. They were mooting a partnership. They were mooting an equity play. They really liked our product on London, and they wanted that to have, an association with the Aer Lingus brand. Um, but sadly, that didn't go the way I'd hoped, and we were running low on cash because we were now taking on a lot of distribution costs that we had to take on ourselves, not being part of Virgin. And I had to find new shareholders to join our existing shareholders. So I did a deal with the company in Sweden, Malmo Aviation, which is now known as Brathens, but they sold on to Brathens later. But Malmo Aviation operated the same aircraft type we did. They were operating into London City from Malmo. So I negotiated a merger with them. So they took a 43% stake in CityJet, and joined our board. And the idea really was we were probably going to put the two airlines together, seeing as we had so much in common. There was great synergy. But a year later, that ended in tears, because there was a row between the Irish shareholders and the Swedish shareholders, and the Irish bought out the Swedes. And then I was still looking to try and raise more money, because we were always trying to expand, and you have to get to a critical mass in a regional airline business, and it's never ending. So I'd say from the day I launched CityJet, there was never a day that I wasn't focused on raising more money. It was an enormous part of the task.
And was it still back and forth Dublin to London at this stage
No, at the
only?
stage, no, we had expanded. We'd gone on Dublin Brussels. I developed a relationship around the same time with Air France. So we were doing Dublin Paris for Air France, or in a code share. But code share means that you put your code on, put their code on, but their code would sell all the seats. It was fantastic. It was really, really good. So we're doing very well on Dublin Paris, 5 flights a day. We were still doing Dublin, London City. Then we started doing London City, Strasbourg for Air France, and then started to do London City, Florence, which is very specialized, one specialized airport to another. Difficult airport to get into, Florence, difficult airport to get into London City, but we were specialists in short field, airfield performance. So, and we nurtured the relationship with Air France, and they took a 25% stake, and I got another shareholder in the UK to come in to join the Irish as well. So we were getting nicely funded, and then I talked Air France into taking the whole thing over, and they took 100% of it in 2000.
Okay.
And CityJet went into the Air France network, into their group, and stayed there for 14 years. And for the first about 4 or 5 years of that, CityJet became the most profitable part of the Air France group per capita. At that stage, CityJet had reached a point of, instead of losing money every year, it was actually making up to 25 million euros a year with 18 aircraft, which was phenomenal. For back then, that was absolutely phenomenal.
Were you running the business still at that stage?
No,
Once?
no, I was on the board as a non-exec, but I wasn't running the business. No, I'd left as an executive, and I went into the world of consulting with Vision Consulting, and then I set up Rainmaker, and then we took over a software house, and we developed a market mainly in North America for software for, funnily enough, airlines. We invented an engine that could calculate crew pay against very complex union rules, especially in North America. The union rules are very, very complex, and all airlines had large audit departments. Just to audit the crew pay, you could have 30 or 40 auditors auditing crew pay before they would make the payment. And it was probably only about 87% accurate. And in all my career, I've never met a staff member who would come to you and say, "You overpaid me last month." Only the ones who were underpaid would look for recompense. So we developed that. We put it into airlines like JetBlue and Mesa and Air Canada, and it grew and grew and grew, and so the audit departments were stood down. The accuracy went to 98%.
Like when I think of software, a software business, I kind of think, wow, I'd love to own that, right? It's almost the exact opposite of an airline from the outside looking in. Did it feel like that?
Oh yeah, very much so.
Mm.
Very much so. And it was a small company. We were down in Sandymount. We had 24 people. It still exists, by the way. We sold it 3 years ago to a company called Skymetrics, a German company, and it's doing really, really well now. I'm jealous, actually. It's doing phenomenal. It's revenues. Rainmaker's revenue since the takeover in 23 has trebled, because the cross-selling that's going on with Skymetrics have 2 other software houses in aviation as well, and the cross-selling across the clients has been phenomenal.
And when you say you're jealous, do you think you would have maybe done the deal slightly differently if you were to go back? Or
No, look, I mean, I say jealous, but I'm saying it sort of tongue in cheek. I mean, the whole idea is we needed that distribution to get really strong. We didn't have it on our own. We sold it at a fair price. It was fine, and obviously that's why they bought it. They knew what they could do with it, and that's business. Isn't that what we all aspire to?
But I suppose even my point there about the software business being an easier business to run as such, if I can use that word, and it's higher margin and all the rest of it. Even then, you still decided to go back into CityJet, and I'm kind of wondering why. Why you did that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I suppose I had unfinished business. First of all, my initial reaction was absolutely not. No way, I'm not doing it. I wanted to do something for CityJet, but stopping short of giving myself to CityJet, I didn't want to do that again. But I actually thought that the backing that was going to come in was incredibly strong, and it really was very, very strong. And it was Ford, it was Falco. It's a major leasing company. It was the old British Aerospace leasing company I dealt with originally way back, had been renamed Falco, had been bought. An MBO had happened. I knew the CEO very well, but they had the backing of Fortress Capital, who actually owned them. They were their majority owner, and Fortress Capital were pretty huge, 65 billion
Okay.
dollar fund. So I felt that with the kind of backing that was there, and the strategy was strong and was endorsed by a major lessor, I felt that we had a really great chance of doing something great, and we actually did. I mean, that is it's probably the subject of another book, but you know, like I went back in 2015, and we'd 18 aircraft of aging Avro RJs, the four engine jets that a lot of people who remember the old city days will remember those jets fondly. Um, but in 3 years, we went from the 18 aircraft to 47 aircraft, which was phenomenal growth across three types. We were winding down the Avros, but we brought in the Bombardier CRJ 900, which is a Canadian jet. We bought 22 brand new from the factory. We couldn't have done that without the backing of major investment.
And did you have a stake in the business at all at that
Yes, I
stage?
did have a stake,
Okay.
yeah. And so we really took the wet lease model, uh, took it very seriously. We got out of all of our scheduled flying ourselves and charter. We won a major contract, long-term contract with SAS, which was for 22 aircraft. We won a contract with Brussels Airlines for 4 aircraft. We were still doing some flying for Air France. We were doing some flying for Lufthansa. We eventually did some flying for Aer Lingus. So we actually had 5 pretty strong wet lease customers. Get up to 47 aircraft, but when we trimmed it back to about 34, which was so going into COVID, we had 5 great contracts. We had 1,250 people. Our turnover was phenomenal. We had initiated a merger with Air Nostrum in Spain. We had got the EU approval to do that, and COVID came and wiped all that out.
Can you explain, just before we go on, just a bit about a wet lease? What does it mean, and what exactly is the kind of the agreement that you have with the airlines?
Wet lease is that we CityJet provide the aircraft with the pilots, with the cabin crew. We paint the aircraft in their colors. We adapt the cabin to whatever they want us to do. We will hire people in the cabin who speak whatever language needs to be spoken to their customers, their passengers. We don't pay for the fuel. We don't pay for the navigation charges. We don't pay for landing charges or handling charges. So we do pay for the maintenance. We do pay for the insurance. So it's known in the trade as ACMI, which stands for Aircraft Crew Maintenance Insurance. So we provide the aircraft, the crew, all of the maintenance, and the insurance.
But not the brand. You're kind of almost the back end, really, of the
Not our brand,
operation.
it'd be their brand on the aircraft. They'll sell the seats. They will contract us to fly. Like typically, we'd be contracted to fly probably 250 hours per month per aircraft for multiple years. Um, and whether they sell one seat or 100 seats, it doesn't matter. But of course, we want our customer to do well naturally, because but we are not involved in the sales process of that. We're not involved in fuel hedging. So all of the things you said at the very start of this interview, that you have to worry about so many things. When you're let's say a wet leasing operation, you take away the heartache of selling, distribution, handling charges, all that kind of stuff. So you just concentrate on those 4 things: the aircraft, the crew, the maintenance, the insurance.
Like I would expect over time, any business as it kind of matures, right, to get a little bit more steady, and things aren't exactly blowing up the whole time. So I would expect a little bit of that. But did it feel better coming back and having these few successes, and going forward with that strategy than it had done prior to the sale to Air France? Say.
No, it felt phenomenally better. I mean, I think there were 2 different kind of experiences. I think in the beginning it was, back in the early 90s, It was very much pioneering, endeavor, all that kind of thing, breaking new ground. Second time round, obviously, I was a lot older, wiser, well, I hope wiser, more experienced. I'd been out of aviation, even though my software business was selling software to airlines, but I had been out in the wider world, I suppose. Um, so, and I'd been in the consulting world, so I'd gone back in, I think, a more rounded business leader, I suppose. Um, and it required a lot of transformation and building, and I felt that's what I'm best suited to. So building something again, but building it from a pretty strong platform and with very solid backing. That was very important. Really, really solid backing. Sufficient capital to do it. Um, and there were a lot of interesting things. I mean, we took on, we took on, two new aircraft types, which is difficult to do. Including we took on the Sukhoi from Russia. We had 7 Sukhois in our fleet as well, and it was a it was a it was an interesting path to take because it was common to popular belief. That aircraft was an absolutely superb piece of work. It was brilliant. It was predominantly a Western aircraft. I mean, it had French engines, it had Honeywell avionics, Liebherr undercarriage. Boeing had been very involved in the very early design of that when detente was a lot better between Russia and America. It was a phenomenal aircraft, and we had it on really good terms. And it threatened to be a real game changer in the regional market. It was a beautiful aircraft, but unfortunately, the Russians don't do process too well. And it was a bit like Al Capone got caught in his taxes. Well, this aircraft got caught on the most minuscule nonsense you would not imagine. But they were brilliant engineers. They designed a phenomenal airplane. It wasn't a spare parts issue, but they could not handle the process of giving a minor repair approval for when a truck hits an aircraft, and it happens every day. Trucks on the ramp hit aircraft all the time. You get a little dent. You take a picture of it, you measure it, you send it back to your maintenance office. The maintenance office sends it to the manufacturer. It all happens in real time. You get a fly-on cert from the manufacturer to think it's within limits, or they say you have to fix it in the next 10 hours, or you have to do this, or you even give them your own design repair and they'll approve it. The whole process would take maximum sort of 3 or 4 hours, and you could fly away. With the Russians, it could take 3 or 4 weeks, and
Was
your
it
aircraft was still parked there, couldn't go anywhere, and that was the killer.
as you're talking, right? I'm thinking about your career, right? Because you're clearly, you know so much, right, about aviation, as you know, as you would, right, having spent so much time in it. And there's also the software, which I appreciate is aviation related. I was wondering, did you ever did you ever think about your career at the different stages? Do you remember looking into the future and thinking, oh, in 10 years' time, I'd like to be doing this? Or did you ever maybe not even formally plan, but did you ever kind of think about kind of your goals ultimately as you went along?
Probably not, to the extent that maybe I could have. To me, it's about momentum. I think that you keep driving forward. You know, I love new ideas. That doesn't mean that I'm fickle, because I think my record says I'm not fickle, because I've stuck with things that were very, very difficult. I didn't just throw them there. I did try and make them work, and I did make a number of them work. And along the way, I forget about my own successes. I tend to talk a lot about the things that were difficult, but yet at the same time, there were a lot of successes. Early days with savings and investments, hugely successful. The software business successful. Consulting was very successful. So I've had a lot of positive moments, but I think I'm even at the age I'm at now. I'm still driven and attracted to ideas and improvement and transformation. I think I'm very, very motivated by that. How could I make something work better than it's currently working? would be what motivates me, and what motivates me really in my business now in Afterburn Strategic. It is about, how can you improve things? How can you make things genuinely better? How can you come up with the right strategy, or how can you unstick a stalled strategy? And I think that um, I've always seen, if I'm looking at my own career, I'm saying that's that is my career. My career is to be an interventionist, rather than a consultant. Um, I think that's so. I'm motivated by continuing to go forward with what I can do. I don't have a plan that says in the next 3 years I'm going to be doing that. No, I don't. I'm driving whatever I'm driving now, and we'll see where that goes.
It's actually very like what I hear about Richard Branson, say, not to bring him up again, but that he kind of looks at a service that he feels isn't being given in the right way, and then kind of spends time on that. Did you look up to Branson in that sense, that kind of before you dealt with him?
Yeah, he would have been very much an iconic figure that I had a huge admiration from a distance, and so from that point of view, yes. When you get up close to your icons, you see them in a different perspective, and I'm sure everybody has that same experience. Um, and you see that, like everybody else, they have to operate within certain constraints. So the public image is often different to the real thing, but that's life. That's television. That's theater. That's the way it is. But I would still have a very good respect for him, because he has got the energy of Almighty. It's the mental energy of Almighty, and he just keeps moving forward. And I would have to say, I would never have the courage to do the physical things that he does, like getting into
Hot air balloon
his
and
space plane, his hot air balloon, his whatever. I would not have the courage to do that. So, that has to be admired.
what about failure? You seem to have recovered quite quickly from these failures, and maybe we're talking about it in an hour long podcast, right? So we can kind of breeze over. This happened then. Um, did do you remember recovering quickly from failure along the way?
Yeah, it's always been, I think, a trait. It probably goes back to my youth, my childhood, sport. Um, you get disappointments, but you can wallow in it, and or you can give up or whatever, or you can get up tomorrow and say, I've got to try harder. And I would be in the try harder category. I've got to try harder. What can I learn from that? Go again. I don't know. Not going to wait till Wednesday. I'll do it tomorrow. Because the sooner I get started on track, the sooner I'm going to be able to uh, make something positive happen again. So I wouldn't feel sorry for myself. I would say, what's the learning? What could I do better? Let's go again. You know.
You mentioned sport there, and your sons, Ross and Harry, are professional rugby players, who a lot of people will know. Um, do you think they've taken lessons along the way from you in your kind of business journey, in their own careers as professional sports
Well, they
people?
certainly didn't take their ball skills lessons from me.
Mm.
They get that from their mother, definitely. She keeps reminding me. But yeah, no, I think I don't know. Look, does some of what they saw I was doing or whatever, does that rub off on them? I don't know. I mean, I've never had the conversation with them about it. I'd be too embarrassed to have the conversation with them about it. So if they're listening here, they might give me an answer. But
Yeah, let's hope. Yeah, come on, guys. We need it.
well, I suppose some of it rubs off. I mean, they would know me as being a very competitive person. So I don't know. Does that influence? Is it in the genes? Is it imitating behavior? I don't know. But certainly I would say, God bless them. They are highly competitive guys, really, really competitive, and very professional, and they have to deal with a lot of disappointment. You go through, as I said earlier, you go through far more lows to get the highs, but that's why you do it, I suppose.
Interventionism. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I suppose that's kind of as what you describe, what you do, rather than consulting now. Talk to me just a little bit about that and some of the projects that you get involved in these days.
Yeah, I think I'm lucky. I mean, I'm out of CityJet in a full time capacity since October. Um, I'm not on the board. I am on the holding company board in Denmark that owns CityJet, so I advise the owner. I'm involved in advising two other aviation businesses. And I enjoy that. I was invited to participate precisely because of my experience and my breadth of experience across the business over many years. So that's very satisfying, and that is about it's about one case. In fact, in all three cases of the work I'm doing in aviation, it's all about strategy. They want me to work with them on strategy. Um, I outside of aviation, I'm working with smaller businesses in Ireland on transformation, where how can we actually make a successful business a little bit more successful. You know, is there a transformation path we should be on? Um, and I really enjoy that because about that's about behavior, and it's about communication, and that I really actually like that. And I think that if I have a passion for anything above anything else, it's probably that. I actually love studying behavior and relationships in business, and how you can actually remove a lot of the obstacles, and how you can get people to literally start thinking along the right path, and communicating openly, and not being afraid of failure. I think that's a critical message. Too many people are afraid of failure. It's people are afraid to take a risk, and they don't necessarily appreciate that the real risk many times, or very often, the real risk is not being prepared to take risk.
Do you find, like, I would think the people that you might work with, might be very entrepreneurial themselves. They might be entrepreneurs, might have started these businesses. They would have taken some risk to get there. Do these people get trigger shy, I suppose is my question.
Yes, they do. They do because um, I think as a business matures, uh, you 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 know you can get complacent. Uh, you can get um, you could become very much more risk adverse because you're basically taking the view that, well, we hold this ground. Let's hold it. Let's keep it. Let's not get overly ambitious. Many times that's the right decision, and especially if it's a business owner and self-made person. That's their prerogative, and it very often becomes a lifestyle choice as well. How hard do I want to push myself and the business? Am I happy? And if a person makes that's the right decision for them, and then that's perfectly fine. But then you have other people who think, I'd still want to grow the business, but I am a bit nervous about it. I'm not sure if I have the right team, or should I supplement the team? Do I have the right strategy? And very often, what happens is that the leadership traits in the founder of a business that get the business off the ground and get the business to the point that it's now at, the point of inflection it's now at, those traits diminish because they become a prisoner to consensus. They like to keep the people on the team with them happy. So I'm all for sharing, and I'm all for looking for opinions. But a really effective leader that progresses is one who takes counsel but doesn't make a blind promise to accept the counsel. Takes it, takes it on board, makes a decision. Might take some of the counsel, might modify the counsel, or might agree with the counsel in some cases. But a lot of leaders don't. They tend to become prisoners of the consensus model, the groupthink model, you know, and now let's run the business by committee. Then the business will start to stall. Then the business is in danger of getting into trouble. because there's competitors out there in their market sector who don't have those constraints, and they're going to pass you out. They're going to steal some of your lunch. So I'm fascinated with that sort of scenario, or those kinds of scenarios.
Yeah, a recent guest on this podcast, Ultian Dervishi, they have he has a balcony manufacturer called For the Pespa, which has done really well. And he was a partner in that business originally with his dad, and they had gotten to a certain scale, and over 6 years they'd built it up to about 3 million, and they subsequently changed the strategy, and it grew, I think, in the following 5 years to 20 million or something like that. And he had this exact problem because he said that he came to his dad and he said, I think this is the right move to make, but I'm cautious about doing it because I don't want to kind of lose, what we've already built. And his dad, which I thought was, was kind of very wise, said to him, well, you don't have, what you think you have, you never had it to begin with, essentially, which was the kind of the unlock that he needed to get past that in his own mind. And I did think that was, is that the kind of thing we're talking about a little bit?
It is. It is. Yeah. It is. And it's a business stops thinking about growth. It's kind of, when you see it you see it every day. You'll see it in the numbers. If growth is flat, well, the first question is, well, why? Let's dig into that. Why is it flat? And okay, then maybe many good reasons why it is. But you've got to constantly ask questions all of the time. Are we the best version of this business that we actually can be? Should we be a better version? And I just think that, like, the real thing you want to keep out of the building is complacency. You can't afford complacency, because complacency is a cancer. It's a cancer in business. It will get you.
How does it look in practice? So, is it kind of through board meetings and strategy sessions? Are you kind of coaching the leaders of the business? Like, how does it all kind of come together?
It really comes together, like in everything. It comes together in conversation. It's just having very honest, open dialogue. Talking to the business owner or the business leader or the CEO. What do you think is wrong? Like, I spend more of my time listening than I do talking to my clients. I encourage them to talk, and I listen, and I watch the body language, and I assess, and I come back, and I'll ask them for permission, as they say in all the military movies. Can I speak freely, sir? I ask permission to speak freely, and I will play back my take on what they've told me and my sense of where I think they are, or where they may be conflicted in their own thinking. And I like the word you used a few minutes ago, unlock. That starts to unlock or unpick, and that gives them a sense of freedom to share an awful lot more with themselves. I'm just there. I'm the catalyst, but they're actually talking to themselves. So it isn't that I've got this wonderful, brilliant solution in my back pocket, going in day one. I don't. I like to listen to the people who are running the business and what they think the issues are, what their ambitions are. And then I'll make an assessment as to whether they have any ambition, whether it's realistic ambition. Do they realize, and I would also like to talk, permission again, to talk to other people in their team, because I don't just want to hear it from the boss. I need to hear what other people think as well. And it's a series of conversations, and I make an assessment. It's not rocket science.
If a genie, right, appeared to me and said, Connor, you're not going to have actually any problems for the rest of your career, right? It's all just going to go swimmingly. I think at the first instance, I'd be like, that sounds great. I think, like, can I just make money? Can you give me a money machine? I just won't ever have to worry about this anymore. But having been through, been in aviation for so long, and I appreciate some of your clients are within aviation, right, as they naturally would be. But having been through a career where many problems pop up and so many things are outside of your control, has that informed your interventionism or consultancy, for want of a better word? Now, has it helped you essentially because you've seen so many different things go wrong?
Massively. And, it I'm only a few months out of, being a very pressurized CEO in an airline that's fighting to live, in a challenging market. But, yeah, my, I've said this recently to somebody, I cannot believe the transformation in me, in myself. And I think it's just that having a little bit of distance from what I was doing every day. My peripheral vision has gone gaga. It's off the Richter scale now. I actually now can see around corners that I could never see before because I was just head down in a bucket, solving one crisis after the next. So I think that when you spend years in that kind of a pressure cooker situation and you're constantly challenged and you become extremely good at managing multiple multiple complex problems simultaneously and understanding the interdependencies on each one. If I have a solution to this before I can get the solution to that, and they're connected. When you play that game for a number of years, you're training your brain in a certain way. When you're released from that, the power and the energy and the muscle memory that you actually have to solve complex problems and real pressure moments, it's just enormous. And you go into another business that would not be as complex, and you're listening to, yes, complex problems in that business, but I just feel I have an ability to see clearly that it's not as serious as you think, or we may be able to find a solution. It may not be as difficult as you think to find a solution. I just, yeah, I would say I wouldn't feel that energy and capability and capacity had I not gone through the learning curve that I went through. So yeah, it's been a massive, massive benefit to me and to my clients, I hope as well.
Pat Byrne, it's been a pleasure having you in today. Thank you so much for doing it. I'm really, really delighted. I've learned a lot from the conversation. Where can people find out more about you and your consulting and all of that?
Well, my consulting is called After Strategic, and the best thing people can do is drop me a mail, and it's a really simple email. It's Patrick at afterburn with a dash .com.
Excellent. Pat Byrne, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks, Connor.